Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for taking time out of your day. We're going to briefly go over some of the updates to the rules and regulations, and we have a special guest today, Rocky Wiles, who heads the department's Compliance and Enforcement Division. So she will be covering two of the regs that are under her purview, and I'm going to go ahead and just do a brief update on changes to regulation number 3. Next slide. Next slide. In terms of regulation number 3, we really just added the different steps for the ability for folks to create a legal business entity record and go through equity share review without having an application before the department. All that really meant was we were rejiggering the documents, and when they get submitted to the department, we did not add any additional documentation requirements. We just changed when they can be submitted to the department, which would hopefully expedite the processing of applications because we could have already vetted the entity, the owners, the primary personnel associated with those. So under our new process, folks can register for a business tax registration certificate. They would send their BTRC application to DCR. We will review it and forward it to the Office of Finance. Once you've been assigned a business tax registration certificate, you can create your legal business entity record. Once you've created your legal business entity record, you have the ability to submit your pre-application review record. And then if it's deemed eligible for further processing, you have the ability to submit your temporary approval application. Once you've been issued temporary approval, you can go through the environmental review. Once the environmental review is complete, DCR does a review of your file for a determination of completeness. If it's complete, you have the ability to pay your annual license fees and then go through the annual license application process. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn over the presentation to Rocky. Next slide, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rocky Wiles. I oversee the department's newly formed Compliance and Enforcement Division, or CED, for our department. I just want to start by, since this is my first time attending one of these, just talking a little bit about the CED, since it's directly related to the regulations I'm going to be speaking about. So the goal of the CED is to educate operators through outreach and just by providing clear and concise information about the operational regulations and the penalties for noncompliance. For example, we've added a regulation that requires our licensees to attest that they have received, read, and understood the operational regulations, and I will go ahead and show that in a little bit. We also want to provide transparency and improved responsiveness related to individual complaints submitted through the complaint portal. To that end, we are currently working with ITA to improve and provide new features in the complaint portal that will allow the public to check the status of their complaint, simplify the process to submit complaints, and provide automatic status updates for those folks that have provided an email to us. We want to encourage our operators to be good neighbors. We've added a regulation that requires licensees to develop and implement a code of conduct for employees and patrons. We've added tools to implement a progressive enforcement process to achieve compliance. That would be in Regulation 7. So this revision provides clarity of the operational regulations, which is Reg 5, and rules for noncompliance, which is Reg 7. We encourage all applicants and licensees to carefully review all these regulations and pay particular attention to Regulation 5. These are your operational regulations and include the penalty type if violated. So I've included the 3 different fines on this slide for minor violations, moderate violations, and major violations if you don't comply with each of these operational regulations. Next slide. I'm going to go over Regulation 5 and provide a couple of examples. I know we don't have too much time. We have reorganized Regulation 5 into sections A through F, which in turn are divided into operational categories. In Section A, these are the general requirements which apply to all commercial cannabis activities. So the general requirements are divided into these categories: responsible management of the business premises, unauthorized modifications, security measures, business premises equipment, prohibited activities, and required notifications. Most of these regulations in this category already existed in the previous regulations. We have just reorganized them so that finding a specific regulation is more intuitive. Next slide. So an example of a new regulation under responsible management of business premises is this requirement that the licensee has to complete and submit a compliance attestation. This is regulation 5A2, Roman numeral 7. Next slide. Here's the attestation. So by signing this form, the licensee declares that they have received, read, and understood all the applicable operational regulations. Going forward, for all those applicants who have not received their license, whether it's a temporary approval or eventually will be their annual license, this form will be due within 30 days of their beginning date of operations. For those licensees who have received temporary approval already, CR will be sending a communication via email next week. And this form will be due within 30 days from the date of that communication. This form also requires that the date the licensee began to operate be provided, and it will be maintained in the licensee's entity record. However, licensees can simply email this form to the compliance team, and we will upload it to the entity record once it is created. Next slide. Sections B through F are as follows as on the slide. So we have section B, which is records retention. Most of this was already in the previous rules and regs. We've just clarified some of the language. Section C is the retailer, applies to the retail commercial cannabis activity. D is delivery of commercial cannabis activity. Microbusinesses is under section E, and testing labs are in section F. Next slide. Another example of a new regulation is under the requirements for delivery under section D. Now require that the licensee register with DCR all of their motor vehicles used for delivery of cannabis and cannabis goods. This form will be due within 30 days of the applicant receiving a delivery license going forward. As with the compliance attestation for those folks that already are operating a delivery business, this form will be due within 30 days of a communication that we will send out via email. Those folks that have received temporary approval for standalone delivery and those with storefront retails. If you have a retail business and don't have delivery as part of your business, you can just reply to our email and let us know that you don't have delivery of commercial cannabis activity. Next slide. We've added a cannabis vehicle fleet delivery form on our website. That is form ENF 3004-form. You don't have to wait to receive our email. You can access this form. It's ready in the forms and documents portion of the licensing section on our website. You can retrieve this form and mail it to dcrcompliance@lacity.org. Those instructions are in the form. Next slide. Once we receive your delivery vehicle fleet information form, the compliance team will then process this form and email back to you a delivery vehicle placard for each vehicle that you register with DCR. This placard does need to be maintained in your delivery vehicle and has to be presented upon request by LAPD or any type of law enforcement or DCR. And it will have a QR code that can be linked to our website so that anybody can verify the validity of your delivery business. Next slide. Regulation 7 was revised to authorize DCR to issue a notice to correct. This is a new tool that we've added so that we can start implementing a progressive enforcement strategy. So We are not, in some cases, not all, it really depends on the type of violation. DCR will have the authority to issue a notice to correct, carries no penalty, to encourage folks to comply. Once we issue a notice of violation will carry with it penalties. And those are basically due within 30 days of us issuing a notice of violation, unless you request a extension of time to comply with said notice. That is also another tool that was added in these regulations to so that we can work with our operators as they're getting to compliance. This is my recap. I'm going to turn it over to Jason.
Thank you, Rocky. So just wanted to let folks know that the rules and regs have been updated as of September 26th, and we recently revised them and reposted them again on October 4th. DCR will be transmitting another policy report to the Planning and Land Use Management Commission later this month. And hopefully some of those recommendations are adopted and become law. And then that will result in further revisions to the rules and regulations. So we're trying to keep them up to date based on changes to local policies, state policies, and local law. So to the extent that we have the discretion to do it, we try to get them updated as quickly as possible so that folks know what the expectations are. And with that, we're going to go ahead and start our 8th question and answer session. And I do want to remind folks that we will be doing another Q&A session on November 2nd. So with that, let me turn it over to the DCR team and we can get started with the Q&A.
Thank you so much. The first question comes from Jesse C. and asks, will regulation number 3 delay the process in regards to opening my storefront? My partners are anticipating a delay with the new regulations. Please advise.
So regulation number 3 really just rejiggered when and how documents can be submitted to the department. We have a new legal entity record where the business, the primary personnel, and the owners can be vetted. That information doesn't have to be renewed annually. You just have to notify us when it changes and then pay applicable modification fees. But it was part of the streamlining process. If you've already got an application before the department, then it's going to come down to whether or not you've been issued a license. If you've been issued a license as part of the renewal process, you've got to create this legal entity record so that we can verify that the entity has been created and determine what it's eligible for. And then if you haven't gone through, you haven't been issued a license, it won't cause a delay in the review of the temporary approval application. But if you are unable to secure a state provisional license by the state's deadline, you will be routed into the state's annual application process, which will result in delays.
Thank you. Narbe A asks, if one wins the lottery and you are already have a property in zoning, how soon can you get a license to operate?
It's really going to vary from applicant to applicant. If you've already got a prospective property and you do plan to either apply for retail storefront or non-storefront delivery, if you create your legal entity record now and you've already registered with all of the taxation entities, that's less paperwork that you would have to submit later this year if you're selected to participate in phase 3 retail round 2. The pre-application review is where the department would vet your proposed business premises. As part of that, we just need an attestation from the owner. And if it's deemed eligible for further processing, you have up to a year to submit your application. And that's the point at which you'd have to provide us with a lease or a copy of the property deed, the business premises diagrams, and then the indemnification agreement and attestations. If you've already completed the equity share review and we've already vetted the entity and the owners and primary personnel for the entity, the application process will be greatly reduced and you will be eligible to get your local compliance underway letter, which is something that may assist you in getting your state provisional license. The state does have a March 31st, 2023 deadline for social equity applicants to apply for a state provisional license. and that the state can no longer issue provisional licenses after June 30th of 2023. If you have not secured your state provisional license, and you have temporary approval, you're not going to be able to operate. And if you're routed to the state's annual application process, you're not going to have a complete state application until you receive your local annual license, and that could result in significant delays. So if you are selected, you've already made some business decisions, or you anticipate making business decisions quickly, as soon as you're selected, you may want to get involved in that process and get everything submitted quickly so that you can get into the state's process.
Perfect. Michael M. asks, can a marijuana charge received as a minor be used for eligibility as a social equity applicant?
Yes, as long as you're able to provide us with some government issued record.
Okay. Terrence Y. Once the licensing process has been completed, will there be any additional mentoring or training for those who have qualified for obtaining a new business within the industry?
So verified social equity individual applicants have access to the various benefits of the social equity program, which includes access to the online learning management system that has over 100 hours of business licensing and compliance assistance training, various grants that may be made available through the state, and then either pro bono or low bono legal services, which are provided by the Los Angeles County Bar Association. So there's a number of services that verified social equity individual applicants prior to applying for a license and after receiving a license can get from the department through our business licensing and compliance assistance program.
Okay. Kent L. asks, I missed applications due to incarceration for marijuana while I should have been released. What can I do?
So you can go onto our website and see what types of activities you could apply for. And if you believe that you can be verified as a social equity individual applicant, you could submit your eligibility verification request when that process reopens.
Our next question is from Nick S. I still have not received verification news. What is the update?
So verification emails are going out on a rolling basis. We had over 1,275 requests. We've sent out communications to over 400 people to date. We have another batch of communications that'll be going out in the next 6 days, and then we'll continue to send out notifications on a rolling basis. We do anticipate all of the verification requests will be processed by Sunday, October 23rd. We will be updating the website to provide information for folks that have been verified or eligibility request and we were unable to verify them. And then we'll also begin to update the DCR licensing portal for individual user profiles either later this week or early next week. So if you haven't gotten an email, we may just not have processed your request yet. We do have 90 days to say. We will send an email to the email account that was submitted with the eligibility request. We will update the applicable user profiles within the DCR licensing portal, and then we're going to have a list posted to the web. So there's going to be 3 different ways that you could find out whether not you've been verified.
Jason, your audio is coming in and out. Jason, are you able to hear?
Yes.
Hey everybody, this is Michelle Korokian. How are you?
Able to hear you.
Jason is about to hop back on. Can everybody hear me? All right.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. I'm just going to go ahead and answer that question for Jason. All verifications right now are going out on a rolling basis. So if you haven't heard yet, you will hear, as we'll be concluding the alerting process on October 23rd. It's a Sunday. So if you haven't heard yet, you will hear. We do ask folks to make sure you have an updated email address with the department because these notifications will be going out through email. However, if you have not received an email yet, you're still waiting, you haven't heard, you can always check our website. We're going to start updating our website tomorrow, and specifically the webpage on our website under eligibility verification individual. There will be a list we will display with your name and your verification status. And furthermore, starting tomorrow, you'll be able to find your verification status in your Acela profile once it's been updated. Okay, so we ask for everybody's patience from now until October 23rd. Jason, are you back? Back on? Hello? Do you want to start? You want to jump back into answering questions, Jason?
Are you
You know,
able to hear me now?
it's still going in and out a little bit. Why don't we take a 2-minute break if we can? And let's get you guys, let's get you back online and then we'll resume. Thank you for everybody's patience. Hi, all. We're still waiting for Jason to rejoin. In the meantime, Rocky, our special guest, is here. I believe so, and she's going to take a crack at answering some of the questions that we received today. Gidget, do you want to proceed?
Sure. We are going to go on our 8th question from Daniel T. If not selected through lottery, am I eligible to continue with applying for cannabis activity licenses listed on the website?
Hello, I'm gonna try my best to answer some of these questions. Yes, you may still apply for some of the other licenses that are available, such as distribution, manufacturing, and delivery. I believe that is the answer.
Thank you.
However, let's just clarify, I'm sorry. So for delivery, you still have to be a verified social equity applicant, but you can still, you don't have to go through the lottery process to apply for those.
Perfect. Andrea C. would like to know more about regulation number 5. Can you provide more specifics?
Well, I just went through, the presentation at a high level summary of regulation 5, unless there's a specific question. I believe that I presented a summary.
Okay, we'll move on. Suave D would like to know how many different licenses are we able to apply for?
I'm gonna apply for. Are you back?
I'm back.
Oh, well, welcome back.
Well, thank you.
Big shoes to fill.
So you can apply for there's not a set cap on the different types of licenses you can apply for. There's only a cap on the number of retail storefront licenses and cultivation licenses that you could be an owner of. But if you wanted to apply as an owner under different business entities for non-volatile manufacturing, distribution transport only, non-storefront delivery, if you're a social equity applicant, you'd be able to do that. So there's just limits on the number of retail storefront and cultivation licenses that an owner can be associated with.
Great, welcome back, Jason. We have a question from Arnie A. What happens after January 2025? Will non-social equity applicants be able to apply and obtain cannabis licenses?
So general applicants can apply for non-volatile manufacturing, distribution, testing, distribution, transport only at the moment. Beginning in January of 2025, general applicants will have the ability to participate in the retail storefront and non-storefront delivery and cultivation license types. And then of course, the city does have a public convenience or necessity process that if we've reached undue concentration, the council would have the discretion to allow for DCR to process an application with a PCN finding.
Okay. Michael T. would like to know, can a delivery license be issued to a person in Arizona? And can it be commingled with an Arizona delivery license?
So there's two different things going on there. Where you live and what state you're a resident of would not preclude you from being able to pursue a California-based license. However, because it's a state-based market, there's not the ability to engage in interstate commerce between the licenses under the current state regulations. So if you lived in Arizona, you could be an owner of a California-based business, but you would be in violation of state law if you were to transport cannabis back and forth between California and Arizona based on the current state requirements.
Okay, the next question comes from Michael C. Will a micro business license be available for verified social equity individuals?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Sure. Will a micro business license be available for verified social equity individuals?
So a micro business license is a form of retail storefront license at the local level, and it has a different local meaning than it does at the state level. So if you are selected to participate in phase 3 retail round 2, you may be able to pursue a micro business, which is a retail storefront license type, based on the zoning for the property. But if you want to apply for other activities, you would have to submit an application for those activities and pay the applicable fees.
Okay, Alfred T. would like to know, how does DCR expect to successfully onboard the new round 2 applicants on top of the phase 3 round 1 applicants when there is real estate inventory shortage? Also, illegal operations have red tagged a number of parcels from even applying for a cannabis license.
So the way round 2 was designed was the selected individuals would have up to a year to complete the pre-application review process and identify a compliant business premises within any of the community plans that have not reached undue concentration. And, once they've identified a property, they would have up to a year to submit the application for that proposed property. To the extent that property owners have allowed for people to engage in unlicensed activities that would prevent DCR from issuing a license, short of the municipal code being updated to remove that as a restriction, DCR has no discretion to look the other way and, authorize it. And, our phase 3 retail round 1 applicants are already geofenced in the community plan area associated with their application. So in other community plan areas where round 2 applicants may be going, there may or may not be round 1 applicants that they would be competing with. But, we have to administer the law as it currently exists. So there's no discretion to kind of deviate from the law.
Hi, so Cordell B. would like to know, can you please explain how I apply for a cultivation license?
DCR is not currently accepting cultivation applications at this time. If and when DCR opens up the cultivation application process, we'll be posting information on our website and as part of either Q&A sessions or webinars associated with that process.
Okay. We have a repeat question, but I will repeat it because I think it's important information. George N. and Robert J. would like to know, when will you update the social equity verifications?
So we've already begun sending out information to folks as it relates to the social equity individual applicant eligibility verification request process. We've sent out over 400 emails to folks that submitted, and we continue to process them and send out the communications. We'll have another batch of emails going out in the next 5 or 6 days, and we're going to be uploading information to the individual's DCR licensing portal user account beginning in the next few days. And we'll also be publishing a dynamic list on the website so that as we complete more verifications, information gets posted there. So there's going to be a number of ways for folks to know whether or not they've been verified under the 2022 eligibility verification process. And again, DCR has at least 90 days to complete processing of this request, and we're on track to finish processing by Sunday, October 23rd.
Thank you. Alfred T. has a licensing portal question. He asked, I'm trying to do the legal business entity in the portal. At the screen where it asks for me to upload documents, I upload and click continue, and it gives me an EMSE error and suggests I contact the agency. What should I do?
I would either take a screenshot and send an email to dcrlicensing@lacity.org, or call our general assistance phone number. I would try it again to see whether or not you're still getting the error. If you are getting an error, I would recommend you go into your browser settings and clear your cache to make sure that you're using the most current version of the data in the portal, because sometimes people have cookies saved on their computer and that messes with their ability to submit things as the records get updated. But if you do have that problem and you've already cleared your cache, the quickest way is to take a screen image, email it to us so that we can see it. And if we can't fix it internally, we can work with our vendor to take care of it. So see if clearing your cache resolves your problem, and then try it again. If not, take a screenshot and then email it to us. That would be the quickest way for us to try to identify what problem you may be encountering.
Thank you, Jason. Christian and Jesse F. Want to know, will the lottery be administered the next day after the lottery 30-day registration window is closed, or how many days after the close of the registration window will the lottery be administered?
You know, I don't know those details yet. We can't administer the lottery until we've opened the lottery registration process for 30 days. And we can't start the lottery registration process until we've completed processing of all of the eligibility verification requests. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have more concrete information later this year, but we don't have any dates for you at this time.
Thank you, Jason. Mary asks, are these Zoom calls recorded and available to view later?
Yeah, DCR records the webinars and they should be available on the website. If you go to the website under the About header, there should be a section for events, and you should be able to find the recordings there.
Thanks, Jason. George would like to know, how do you expect us to be successful if all these unlicensed shops and deliveries are eating up all the business?
So, I mean, this is a complicated one because you've got the unlicensed shops, which the LAPD, DWP, Building and Safety, and other city departments have the authority to do enforcement actions against. And DCR doesn't have any discretion to deal with those businesses. And in terms of what DCR does is, as part of the enforcement task force, we have a role within the cannabis complaint portal, and we make sure that complaints that are not associated with one of our licensees are routed to the appropriate parties, which are headed by LAPD, DWP, Building and Safety. And, you know, then it's up to them to basically take an enforcement action if they're able to verify that unlicensed commercial cannabis activity is occurring. DCR will be hosting a series of virtual town halls dealing with kind of cannabis in your community, partnering on progressive enforcement strategies. And the first webinar will be on Tuesday, October 11th, which is next week at 6 p.m. And the department is trying to seek input from community members about what's going on within their community, what they're seeing, and then what strategies and ideas that may exist to help get rid of the unlicensed businesses within those geographic areas, because it varies from, you know, neighborhood to neighborhood. There's going to be information on the website about how to participate in Cannabis in Your Community partnering with the Progressive Enforcement Strategies event. And then, of course, DCR will transmit a report to the City Council with the public input that we've received, and we'll see whether or not the policymakers adopt any of the strategies to help curb the unlicensed, cannabis businesses operating within the city.
Thank you, Jason. Lavon E. would like to know how many people in total were excluded from verification of the 1275.
We haven't finished processing yet. So I don't know how many folks out of the 1275 are going to be unverified, but I know that there were approximately 100 duplicate submissions. So the maximum number of people that could be verified is around 1,100 if everybody submitted all of the documentation necessary. To date, I think we've verified about 450 out of the 1275, and we've sent communications to that effect.
Okay, Michelle G. would like to know, has the ability to change CPAs been approved? What is the status of this issue?
So, no, it has not been approved. The ability for folks to either relocate to a different community plan area is one issue. The ability for folks to refile in a community plan area is a separate issue. At this time, there have been report packs requested, and DCR anticipates that on at least one of the issues, we'll be transmitting a report to the Planning and Land Use Management Committee later this month. And hopefully it'll be considered either later this month or sometime before the end of the calendar year.
Okay, the next question comes from Tiffany W. Are delivery-only licenses allowed to have customers pick up cannabis? It's happening a lot.
Delivery-only licenses are not allowed to engage in retail storefront. So somebody couldn't walk up to the premises or go inside of the premises and purchase cannabis directly.
Thank you. Alfred T. When does DCR project the next grant program to start for social equity applicants?
Dr. Brown and her team recently launched a seed rental assistance grant program. I believe information is on the elevateimpactla.com website that has more information. And I also on our website, if you go to the social equity page, they would have information about the program and other grant related programming.
Thank you. Ashley A. asks, please explain the legal business entity record requirement for current dispensaries renewing their temporary approval for 2023.
So DCR previously, ownership, primary personnel information, and business formation documents were housed on each application record. And, if a application was abandoned or it wasn't eligible for processing, what would happen is the applicant would have to resubmit all of that paperwork, regardless of whether or not it had already been vetted by the department. So to make the process easier and for some of the review to carry over to future applications, we created a standalone legal business entity record that will house the business related information, the owners, the primary personnel, and that information can exist in a record that can then be carried over into individual applications. But it doesn't have to be independently renewed. It just has to be modified if there's changes to the ownership, primary personnel, or the way the entity is operating. What that does is it's going to ultimately reduce the future application cost, and it allows for folks to have their entity vetted before an application is actually submitted. And to the extent that you're applying for non-storefront delivery, retail storefront, something that requires the applicant entity to be a social equity applicant, you could go through the equity share review separate and apart from the application process. Our phase 3 retail run 1 applicants and our non-storefront delivery applicants have expressed concerns that sometimes equity share review is the most time-consuming review, and they wanted an ability to do it outside of the application process, which materialized when we created this legal entity record. So folks that have created entities could go through that review prior to actually submitting an application and having to lock in a location and start paying rent.
Okay, moving on. Hamlet A. Is there a fee waiver for the 2023 renewal license application for social equity applicants?
No, there are currently no fee waivers available for 2023 renewal licenses.
Okay, Andrew G. would like to know, will new licenses, for example, cultivation, retail, distribution, and manufacturing, be available to the public?
So cultivation, retail, non-storefront delivery are limited to social equity applicants through January of 2025. All applicants can apply for distribution transport only, non-volatile manufacturing. So DCR is accepting applications for those license types.
Okay, Eric R. asks, will a verified SCIA be able to get the licensing process upon finding a property, or will an applicant have to wait for a period of time? And specifically, they're asking about processing of type 9 delivery.
So there are things that prospective applicants can do in terms of registering their business, getting a BTRC, going through the legal entity review process and the equity share review process, which is required for the non-storefront delivery license type or type 9 license type. You know, once you've gone through the pre-application review and we've, you know, deemed the proposed business premises location eligible for further processing, you have up to a year to submit your application. And that's the point at which you're going to have to secure the property, either by a lease or a property deed, submit your business premises diagram, submit the attestations, the indemnification agreement, as well as have to go through an initial inspection of the location. So really your ability to navigate through the local requirements will kind of determine how quickly you're eligible for local licensure. And then of course, you also have to apply for your state license. The state does have a deadline for social equity applicants to submit an application for a provisional license of March 31st, 2023. And if you don't get your provisional license by next June, you will not be eligible for provisional licensures at the state level, and you'll have to get an annual license. And you can't get an annual state license until you've received an annual city license. So really the period of time it will take for you to become operational and begin operating is going to vary based on how you navigate through the local process as well as the state process. And then of course, you're also going to have to comply with building code, fire code, public health code, and things that are outside of DCR's purview, but you will have to work with other agencies to make sure that you are in compliance with other codes before you operate.
Okay. Lisa S. asks, if I am an EMMD, what rules changes should I be concerned with?
So existing medical marijuana dispensaries, or EMMDs, are kind of terminology from the past. Folks were able to apply for licenses under phase 1 if they met the definition of EMMD, but all licensees have to meet the same requirements under the municipal code, as well as the rules and regulations in order to lawfully operate. We did get funded for a compliance and enforcement division. The division head, Rocky Wiles, is in the process of filling her vacancies. So DCR will be doing more proactive outreach and spot inspections of licensees And folks are going to need to make sure that they're complying with local law as well as the rules and regulations, or they could be cited for non-compliance. So I think that's the change that most of our licensees should be concerned with, is making sure that you're adhering to local law and the rules and regulations, and then making sure that if you are deficient or found to be in violation, you remedy those violations quickly before the department starts to levy fines on your business. EMMDs were allowed to apply for retail storefront. As part of the retail storefront license, they also had the ability to engage in delivery activities. If you are engaged in a delivery activity, you are going to have to make sure that the vehicles that are being used for deliveries are registered, so that you can get the placard. And then, of course, there's the attestation that the owners have read the rules and regulations, and that will have to be submitted to Rocky's unit in order to stay in compliance.
Okay, Lauren D also has a question regarding delivery and rules changes. And she asks, how are the new rule changes going to affect delivery applicants almost done with the inspection process?
So a lot of the changes are, affect when a business is operational and they start to actually engage in the activity to make sure that they're complying with local law. So a delivery applicant going through the initial inspection process, once they're eligible for licensure and they're going to be able to operate, they're going to have to submit the compliance attestation. And then you're also going to have to register your vehicles and make sure that information is transmitted to the department as it relates to the fleet of vehicles that you're using for delivery. And those are things that will be expected to come in after you've completed your inspection process and, hopefully been issued temporary approval and begin your operations.
Okay, Lauren F asks, I submitted my renewal and received an invoice, but haven't completed the business entity application. Will I need to do something special before paying the invoice?
You can pay the invoice. When the invoice is paid, our processing team will look to see whether or not the legal entity record has been created. If not, you're still going to need to create that legal business entity record, and you may receive a communication from the licensing team saying, we've noticed that you've paid your renewal fees for your commercial cannabis licenses for calendar year 2023, but our records don't indicate you've created a legal business entity record. You need to do that. If you haven't created your legal business entity record, certain modifications like ownership modifications and primary personnel, you're not going to be able to submit because that's the record that gets modified under the current process. So it's in your best interest to make sure that you've created the legal entity record to both comply with the renewal requirement, as well as give your entity the ability to be modified in the future.
Okay, Mary H wants to know, how much does it cost to transfer a license to another location?
I don't know the fee amount off the top of my head, but the fees are posted in LEMC 10419, and you can see them on our website. You can access the municipal code, but it's a few $1,000s per license. And, it will vary whether or not you're just transferring a license from one business premises to another business premises, and it's going to be issued to the same legal entity, or whether or not you're looking to do a relocation and entity substitution. If you're doing a relocation and entity substitution, the proposed applicant entity will have to pay new application fees. So it'll be a whole new application fee for that type of transfer.
Okay, Maurice C asked, does LADCR prioritize certain types of modification requests over others?
No. the modification requests by and large are handled by the assigned analyst. And, it's just how it fits into that assigned analyst workload.
Okay, thank you. Deidre H asked for social equity applicants who have not submitted an application yet. Are we still eligible for delivery or distribution?
At this time, social equity applicants can still apply for non-storefront delivery and distribution.
Okay. Jason M, is there a process in place in the new rules and regulation that provides for relocation to a different community plan for retail social equity applicants?
No.
Okay. Nair Ruth and Shaw W ask, has DCR submitted a new report to Plum that will include a recommendation for relocation outside of a CPA yet? If soon, when?
The report will be transmitted in the near future. It'll be a little bit later this month.
Excuse me. Garnet K, what happened to the transparency that was promised throughout this process, and will applicants from back in 2019 be compensated for the delay in our licensing being approved? And will legal representation be provided for the applicants that have been delayed since approval in 2019?
I really don't know what the question is getting at. For applicants that have been in the queue since 2019, most of our process is applicant driven, and the ability for the applicant to get us the necessary documentation and information to continue getting processed. So DCR is not going to be compensating folks for delays that are, applicant driven. And in terms of access to low bono or pro bono services through LACPA, if you're a verified social equity individual applicant, you may be eligible to apply for those services. And I would reach out to the social equity team.
Okay, Samuel M is asking, if I was verified in phase 3, does that give me an opportunity for a license to have delivery service and other things, but not brick and mortar? The lotto, is that a process for the next level, or can I also get a brick and mortar?
If you were verified in 2019 under the original eligibility criteria, you can apply for the non-storefront delivery. In order to participate in the lottery, you had to be verified under the expanded criteria, and we had a eligibility verification request submission period earlier this year. That period has closed, so if you didn't apply to get verified under the expanded criteria, it's too late to do that now. If folks were verified under the expanded criteria, the verification had to have included information about arrest or conviction and meeting that criteria in order to participate in the lottery for phase 3 retail round 2. The administration of the lottery will result in DCR selecting a sufficient number of social equity individual applicants to submit applications for whatever remaining licenses are available citywide. So the lotto will effectively determine who can submit applications for retail storefront. And, if applicants are either not issued a license or their record gets abandoned, DCR will have the authority to administer a future lottery to fill any of the remaining spots.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Carrie B asks, applications that did not meet the 200-foot threshold during phase 3 round 1 and were eligible to apply for delivery license, are they eligible for seed 1.0?
So I'm not, ultimately there were 200 applicants that were deemed eligible to participate in phase 3 retail round 2. So I'm not 100% sure what the 200-foot threshold is. Folks that were eligible to participate in phase 3 retail round 1, or who have applied for the non-storefront delivery license type, may be eligible for different grant funding. This round of grant funding for the seed program is for rental assistance, and you have to have a lease or a binding letter of intent to participate in the application process for rental assistance.
Okay. James R. would like to know, if you were to win the license lottery, could you partner with someone who already has a licensed dispensary?
If you're selected through the lottery, you will have an opportunity to submit an application for the retail storefront commercial cannabis activity. And, whether you decide to pursue it as a sole proprietor or, pursue it as a legal entity, you could partner with folks that are already licensed. One thing to keep in mind is folks are limited to be owners on up to 3 retail storefront licenses. So if somebody's already an owner of 3, they can't be an owner of a 4th.
Okay. David M. would like to know, if you apply as a sole proprietorship, then have partners and want to change to LLC or S Corp, is there an easy way to update EIN and BTRC with DCR? Lots of letters.
So the entity identification number and the business tax registration certificate number are maintained by other government entities, and you would have to register the LLC or S Corp with those entities and get the necessary identification information from them. And then you could submit an entity substitution request, and that can be processed as a modification. And then it's going to be up to the LLC or S Corp to meet the requirements to have a license issued in their name. But that type of request is generally only available to licensees. So if you're an applicant, you're not going to be able to make that type of request. You would have to just submit a new application.
Okay. Michael C. is asking about the seed program and how long will that be available?
For the rental assistance grant, applications will be accepted until 11:59 p.m. on, I think, Thursday, March 20th, 2023, unless the funds are exhausted and no longer available, at which point we'll have to stop accepting applications and processing requests whenever we've exhausted the funding.
Okay. Desiree B., where in the Excella portal will it tell us that we are in the lottery?
So when you log into the portal under account management, that will display what your 2022 SCIA status is. If you have a status of verified -arrest/conviction, you will be eligible to register for the lottery. When the lottery registration period opens, you'll need to go in and register for the lottery. And if you successfully register for the lottery, you'll have a record under your My Records that reflects that you've applied for the lottery. So if you're looking for your social equity individual applicant status, that can be found on the account management page. If you have timely registered for the lottery and you're looking for your lottery registration record, you'll have to go My Records.
Okay. Myra G. is asking, how will the new rules and regulations impact the current cannabis dispensaries?
I think we've kind of covered that through earlier questions, but there's different disclosures that folks are going to have to make to the department, primarily for the non-storefront delivery activity and the vehicles that are associated with the fleet for the delivery. The rules and regs reflect the updated application process and how different documents and forms have been rejiggered to different records. Modifying a record is going to depend on where the information is stored on a go-forward basis. And folks are going to have to make sure that they've read the rules and regulations and they understand kind of what standards they're going to be held to. Because now that we have a funded compliance and enforcement division, the department is going to be more proactive in getting out to all of the different operators and making sure that they're following local law as well as our rules and regulations. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest changes, is the funding and the creation of this new division, because we're going to have resources to actually send out to these locations to be more proactive in our inspections.
Okay, we have a question from Victoria D. When will more dispensary licenses be made available?
So we've already opened and closed the SEIA eligibility verification request window. Folks had to get verified under the expanded criteria in order to register for the lottery. In order to register for the lottery, you had to have been verified under the expanded criteria with at least the arrest conviction plus one of the other criteria. And we will be opening up the lottery registration process later this year, and we hope to administer the lottery later this year. So the folks that ultimately get selected through the lottery are going to be the folks that are able to apply for the remaining retail storefront licenses. And if folks, for some reason, don't meet the requirements or don't submit an application, if there is more license capacity available in the future, DCR would conduct another lottery in the future.
Okay, we have a question from Bruce A, who's asking, what are the department's key milestones for the next year?
I don't know if we have enough time. I don't think an hour and a half is enough time to answer that question, but we're working on updating the license processes based on the revised rules and regs, the way we're storing the information. We're trying to reduce the fees, which will reduce the monetary barrier to entry by how we're rejiggering some of the record types. It's going to simplify the modification process. We're, actively working on transitioning our local licensees into the environmental review process so that, the department could be in a position to administer the annual licensing process. Licensees have to get through environmental review before we have the ability to do the determination of completeness, which is a prereq to get into the annual application process. We're expediting the review and issuance of temporary approval to eligible applicants. We've created the way for eligible applicants to create the legal entity record. And, we're in the process of hiring additional personnel and training them with the hopes of having subject matter experts to kind of deal with the different records. We are going to be proposing a series of amendments for the municipal code, which will hopefully be taken up by policymakers before the end of the year, with the goal of reducing duplication of effort between our process and the state's process, with doing some additional streamlining and then making the process more accessible to applicants and licensees. The department is actively engaged with, various stakeholders and community members to get feedback on existing processes and activities, on unlicensed businesses, and what a proactive enforcement program for unlicensed businesses would look like. So there's going to be a number of different report backs going out. And, we've got hundreds of new SEIAs that are going to be verified through this process, that are going to have access to the social equity program and the different resources provided by that program. So that's going to be an onboarding and update. So I think there's a lot of different moving pieces with the state transitioning away from provisional licensure. that's going to impact our ability to, issue licenses at the local level. And what we're trying to do now is streamline our process so that folks can meet the requirements for the state's annual application process as early as possible. And I think getting those changes through committee and council are going to definitely be one of our priorities, which will ultimately drive our ability to hit other key milestones and provide programming to stakeholders.
Okay. Even R asks, if you were previously verified in the beginning of the social equity program and applied during PCN, do you have to be re-verified with the new changes, including having a conviction?
If you have an existing record that relies on your 2019 verification, that record won't be impacted. But if you plan to participate in the lottery, or you want to be participating in the social equity program after the current calendar, you do have to get re-verified under the expanded criteria.
Okay, Michael F., and this is our last question. Michael F. would like to know, how do I get stakeholders and get a city council file number on a PCN application during the last PCN round? I was somehow overlooked, although I hold a Michael license already.
So the public convenience or necessity pilot program has already ended. So if you submitted your PCN filing form when the department was accepting them and you paid the applicable fees, your request would have been transmitted to city council and it would have been assigned a council file number. The quickest way would be to log into the DCR licensing portal, go to My Records, and then find your PCN record to see what the status of that record is. And if you have a record, it may have if you have a record that was transmitted to the city council, there will be a corresponding council file number on that record. Or you could go into the city clerk's website and basically query the council file numbers for your particular business or particular location with the keyword cannabis or social equity to identify what a corresponding council file number could be. So there's a couple of different ways to do it, but I would start with the DCR licensing portal.
And that was our last question. Thank you, Jason.
You're very welcome. So that concludes our 8th question and answer session. And our next one will be on November 2nd. So I look forward to meeting with this group again on the 2nd and getting through hopefully another 40 or 50 questions at that time. So thanks everybody. Hope you have a great day and we'll talk to you later. Bye.